am notoriously bad with directions. When I was in high school, my brother and I were driving to my cousin's house. They lived about 30 minutes away, and I had been there before. Someone else had been driving when I'd gone before, but I kind of knew about where they lived, I thought. We didn't have their address when we started driving there, but I was pretty sure that I knew where their house was. I would know it when I saw it. I was wrong. We got up on the mountain where they lived, and we drove around a while, but it was with a sinking feeling that I realized nothing looked familiar. And that was when we realized that neither me or my brother had our phones with us. Well, instead of driving the 30 minutes home to get our phones or our address, we decided we would just drive around for a little while and see if we could figure it out ourselves. After driving for a little while, we realized that we would need help, and so we decided to stop at someone's house and ask them if they knew the Bartletts, my cousins. The people in the house didn't know them, but they did have a directory of sorts, which pointed us more in the right direction. It didn't have their address on it, but we were able to realize that we were in the wrong neighborhood and drive up to the neighborhood where they actually were at. We drove up to the right neighborhood, or at least closer to the right area, and drove through the little cul-de-sacs. But still nothing felt familiar to me. Finally, after nearly an hour of driving, we decided it was probably time to give up, and we would head home and either get their address or just not go there that day. In a last-ditch effort, before we gave up, we decided to stop at someone's house again and ask them if they knew where my cousins lived. We walked up to the front door and knocked, and when they answered, we asked if they knew our cousins. And to our surprise, they said they did, and not only that, but our cousins lived next door to them. I don't know why I didn't recognize the house, but it did not look familiar to me. But after nearly an hour of searching, we did finally make it to our destination. Often outlines for novels are compared to road maps, and some are obviously more detailed than others. I am a big plotter. I really love to outline and have that roadmap for where I am going before I get there. I don't know, maybe it's tied to my bad sense of direction. Today I just wanted to kind of talk about why I think that I am an outliner and like why I personally really enjoy outlining. And I would love to hear in the comments below your experience. Are you a plotter, pantser, mix, and kind of, tell me why you think that that method works for you. I'd love to hear about it and chat more in the comment section. So one of the biggest reasons that I think I personally enjoy outlining for my novel is because of my personality. I am very high in orderliness. If you are looking at a Big 5 personality test, it is my most extreme area of personality, and it really affects my life. I basically revolve my life around my orderliness, my lists and my plans and my calendars and all of the things that I love to do that are more orderly. And so it makes sense to me that I would like to plan my novels as well. And in fact, as I have gone through the process, this is my second time going through the process with my current novel. My first book that I wrote, I did have a little bit of an outline because I've tried before to write novels, and without an outline it's really hard for me to do it. So I knew I wanted an outline, but I didn't really know very much about story structure, and so my outline was a little bit vague and definitely it was missing stuff. Can look back now and see that it was missing stuff. Because it wasn't a very detailed outline, it was actually harder for me to write my book. And so what I would do is, as I was drafting, I would actually take the next scene that I was going to write and I would outline the next scene a lot more specifically. And I would do that with every scene that I came across, and I would outline that way. And this time around, I spent a lot of time brainstorming and thinking about what I wanted my book to be, and world building and things like that, and I knew a lot more about story structure. And so my outline has been a lot more detailed. What I did is I filled out the Save the Cat beat sheet with my two characters that I'm following, and then I went through and I broke those down into individual scenes. So I know what each scene is going to be, and those scenes I don't have broken down as specifically, although I think I could do that and enjoy it. But I do have every single scene listed that I want to write into my novel currently. And of course, as I've been writing, I've had to change some things because things change as you're drafting. My favorite part of the whole process so far, from drafting to editing, would be actually outlining after brainstorming. After I have all of the brainstorming done, I had a lot of fun organizing that information that I'd come up with into my outline and filling in the empty spots. And I also really enjoy editing, which I also think is part of my personality. Kind of tied in with that is a question that I actually got from a book called Talk Like Ted. The book was just okay to me, but I really liked the question that he asks in it. And he asks, what makes you wake up in the morning? And he doesn't mean like specifically like, oh, writing novels makes me wake up in the morning. He was thinking more like broad. My husband, for example, what makes him wake up in the morning, he gets really excited about mastery. And then once he masters it, teaching that to other people. For me, I realized that after thinking about it for a while, that the thing that makes me wake up in the morning is taking chaos and creating order from that chaos. I love creating order, which is why I love things like lists and editing videos and sharing my plans on YouTube for what I'm going to do and things like that. I really love the process of having something that is unorganized, and the actual process of organizing it is really exciting for me. And I think that comes back to the outline as well. I really love having the outline because it takes the chaos of the writing process and it makes it more orderly and it puts it more in an organized fashion, if that makes sense. Kind of switching gears about what I'm talking about, one of the reasons that I really like an outline is because it helps to decrease the anxiety for me when I'm writing. The anxiety that I experienced, I believe, was learned. It was something that, because I am a perfectionist, which again could tie in with personality and my orderliness, but because I got super worried about whether or not my draft was going to actually be good or not. Because of that, when I would sit down to write, then it was really anxiety inducing and I would just force myself to do it anyway, and then I wouldn't like what I'd write and then I would give up. And so then it created a feedback loop where my brain would go, hold up, last time you sat down to write it was awful, you didn't like it and it didn't turn out good. And so then I would sit down to write again and I would have more anxiety. And so it created like this kind of this loop that I had to learn to get out of. One of the things for me is that when I sit down to write and I don't know what I'm going to write, I get very anxious about it. Tight stomach, I don't want to write, the words are really hard to get out. But when I know kind of where I'm going and I have kind of an outline of things that I want to hit on and I know that where I'm going is kind of heading in the right direction, then it's a lot more easier to sit down and get lost in the words and just let the words start flowing. And sometimes I end up flowing and putting things in that weren't in the outline or going off the outline or whatever, but it's just the knowing where I'm going is really helpful for me. And I realized this, it's not necessarily that I need to know every detail, I just kind of need to know that what I'm writing is heading in the right direction. And I realized this when I was writing my character for my Cinderella retelling. The main character is, I really struggled with her. I sat down to write her and the character that I wrote that came out was not the character that I was picturing and it wasn't working. It took quite a few weeks. I think I wrote 6,000 words and was submitting these to writing group a little bit at a time and talking with my writing group about it, trying to figure out what was wrong, skipping her section to write my other character's section sometimes because I had her figured out, until I finally realized that I just needed to figure out her character, because every time I'd sit down to write, it made it really hard to write because I would sit down and I would get that anxiety again because it wasn't working and I didn't know what to do about it. So what I ended up doing was I sat down with some ideas from writing group and I wrote a scene that kind of out of order, that was a little bit later. I wrote a scene between her and the prince, gave it to my husband for feedback and got feedback on it and finally figured out what her character was, and then all of a sudden it was a lot easier to actually write the words again. I was able to write her scenes, and even though I still sometimes sit down and have that initial anxiety, I'm able to get over it and get my words out fairly quickly. And the outline really helps with that, because when I sit down, if I'm like, I don't want to write today, a lot of times if I just look at my outline and I'm like, okay, what am I going to write next? Oh, that's the scene. Then I'm able to sit down and write that scene, and it's super helpful for me. And then the last thing that I wanted to talk about, I guess, is just using my outline as a constraint. When I was younger, I was a very creative person, just like most kids are. I would draw and sing and make up my own stuff, and I had the binder that I would carry around in 6th grade that I was gonna publish. That was actually really awful because I was a 6th grader, but it was really fun and I wasn't worried about whether or not it was actually good. It was just a really fun creative outlet for me. And as I grew older and started worrying about whether things were good or not, I kind of lost that freedom to be creative. Not only did I lose the skill, but I also started thinking that creativity wasn't a skill, but that it was something that you're either born with or you're not. And I guess I just forgot how creative I was as a child, and I was like, I just am not a creative person. I'm a orderly person. I'm a list person, but I'm not a creative person. And I saw myself in that way. And when I started to write novels again, as a teenager and as an adult, I've had to relearn that I can be creative, and that it is a skill that I can learn. And it is something that I have been working on, and I still don't feel like I am the best at it, but I am getting better, and I am learning things that work for me to help me to be creative. An outline is actually one of those things for me because as I have learned story structure, it has given me constraints. When I would sit down to outline before, because I was struggling to write first drafts and I thought that an outline would help me with that, I would sit down to write the outline and I wouldn't know what to put there either. And then I'd just have a blank page or just a couple ideas and I'd put them down, and then my outline would either be non-existent or it wouldn't be detailed enough to actually help me because I just didn't know, I didn't have the knowledge to create an outline, because I didn't know that you needed things like I didn't know what you put in the middle. I didn't know how to structure the ending. I didn't know about character arcs and things. And so as I have learned those things, then it's easier for me to sit down and say, okay, I've brainstormed these ideas and I can fill in the different beats, and then I can say, okay, I am missing a whole bunch of fun and games, and I need to fill in stuff there. So then I can start brainstorming ideas for that specific section, and the constraint actually makes me more creative because I know kind of what I'm looking for, and I know where I'm missing stuff in my story, and it just really helps me to come up with ideas to have kind of that direction that I should be going in, if that makes sense. So that's how an outline helps me, and why I personally use an outline, why I would say that I am a plotter. I would love to hear about your experiences in the comments again, so don't forget to drop that down there. If you like this video, don't forget to hit that thumbs up and subscribe for lots of reading and writing content. If you want to follow my reading journey, you can follow me on Goodreads. I do leave a review for every book I read there. You're also welcome to follow my Instagram, where I share more about my writing journey and some of my favorite books that I've read. Thank you so much for watching my video. I will see you in the next one.